From athletes to authors, innovators to icons, we connect with those who help shape the South's culture, revealing the stories of their lives, their journeys, their triumphs and tragedies, what molded them into who they are today. Broadcasting across the Southeast, telling the South stories. This is where their stories live. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating. This is Audibles with Jason Scarborough. This week on Audibles, we bring you an Audibles Encore. This week, Jason sits down with John Currence.
So you were born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. So how would you describe your childhood growing up?
Degenerate, I guess.
Why degenerate?
No, I'm kidding. I had a sort of a crashingly sort of dull childhood in that. I mean, I grew up, in New Orleans during the Civil Rights era. I mean, I was born in '64, and so a city that, um, you know, was untouched by, for the most part, by civil rights. New Orleans is such a checkerboard that, we all lived amongst one another. I mean, it was literally like a checkerboard. You could go from, one block to the next, and it would, go from sort of a white neighborhood to a black neighborhood, and so, childhood was sort of unremarkable. I grew up in uptown New Orleans in a little neighborhood that was sort of strangely Brooklyn-esque in that, that was the first big supermarket, the Winn-Dixie, planted a half block away from my house, and we had a McKenzie's bakery and a bank, and there was a neighborhood bar and a couple of dress stores and salon and dry cleaners, all a liquor store. These things are sort of all bunched up together in this 2 block area. And so, there was just a lot of coming and going in our neighborhood. I grew up in a time when, we stayed out and played in the neighborhood running around, until, the street lights came on and mom screamed at us to come home. And so it was a more innocent time, but at the same time, I was coming of age in the early '70s as the the draft in Vietnam was in full swing, and so I remember watching Walter Cronkite sort of list off the numbers killed for the day, the draft numbers coming up, and being able to do math at the time and listening to stories about Vietnam, a conflict that had raged for 20 something years, when I was 9 years old, and and then thinking, well, I'm eligible for the draft when I'm 18. This war's been going on for 20 something years. I'm just 9 years away. Like, I could get drafted, and so I sort of lived with that. There was turmoil socially, in that I was born just after Kennedy was shot. Nixon was president, so we had Watergate, and but it was still a time of certain innocence, and so I love that. I loved growing up in New Orleans. It was it was a very sort of fragrant and rich upbringing. That just so much of my young life was about. It was about food. It was about hunting and fishing. It was about spending time with family and friends, and our neighborhood friends are still our friends to this day. 50 something years later. Yeah, I mean, New Orleans was a magnificent place to grow up because there was so much exposure to everything. Um, God, we started drinking when we were like 13 or 14 years old, and smoking cigarettes when we were 10 or 11, and it was I mean, we used to ride our bikes all the way downtown from uptown near Tulane University. It's 6 or 7 miles, where we just take off and go, a pack of kids, and our parents didn't worry about where we were going, and I can't imagine my daughter in a couple of years just going off and disappearing for half a day and not being at the police station demanding some sort of attention and finding out where my daughter is, and knowing that something terrible was wrong. So, I loved it. I wouldn't trade growing up in New Orleans for anything in the world. But at the same time, I wouldn't trade being able to raise my daughter in Oxford for anything in the world, for the sake of my, you know, selfish psychosis.
Now, what's unique about your childhood is because of your dad's job, you got to spend some time in Europe when you were growing up. So, how would you describe that time in your life? You speak so eloquently about New Orleans. How would you frame the time that you got to spend in Europe with your family because of your dad's occupation?
A couple of things. I'd say, and sort of what I was waxing nostalgic for, the world being a different place, in the States then. It was also, a different place in the UK. So we lived in Edinburgh for about 2.5 years. And yeah, my dad was in oil and gas. And so he was sort of instructed to pick up his family at, uh, at 36 years old and move, a third of the way around the world, which I remember when I turned 36 thinking, about that. And I was like, I could have no sooner moved around the corner at 36 with the family than move a third of the way around the world. But my mother was a history teacher when I was young, and so she taught high school history. And my parents were extraordinarily wise, and so they knew that when we moved over there, I was 9 and my brother was 7. And my dad was doing business in Norway, was doing business in the Netherlands, Germany, um, Egypt, India. And so regularly, they would tack on a weekend to my dad's business trip, pluck us out of school, and we'd go to Rotterdam or Den Haag and spend the weekend in the Netherlands. And then my father would have business, and my mom would take off in a car with us, and we'd drive to Belgium and drive through the countryside. And this is before there's a giant highway system in Europe, and then we had to eat while we traveled. And so to go to Rome, and go into a trattoria and actually see you know a true Italian carbonara, and taste that, in a restaurant in Rome, to eat veal blanchette in a brasserie in Paris. So to actually see those things and taste those things in the place of their origin, again, that was not that I ever had any thought of becoming a chef, but in retrospect, like that was informing, my interest and understanding of food, that would come, a decade later.
Moving back to America, you guys specifically moving back to the Carolinas. I mean, were you ready to come back to the States? What was that transition like for you when you guys came back?
So the greatest challenge for us was to uh, to fully lose an accent that we had curated very quickly, in Scotland, so that we could, that we would fit in and not stand out. I mean, we were indiscernible from any other Scottish kid, our age. The school that I started in was, for lack of better description, it was an academy school in New Orleans. So it was a school that was set up by a man from outside of New Orleans. I think he was from Lumberton. It was called Sam Barth, and it was very much set up to avoid integration.
Okay.
And it was also, for the course of its existence, was the football powerhouse. I mean, as in grammar school, we had gym 3 times a day. If you got crossways with another student, they encouraged you to fight. Now, but it was controlled. They put these gigantic boxing gloves on you, and before your gym class, they would circle everyone up and they'd let you go at it, and until somebody said uncle, and then you had to take off the gloves and shake hands. And the 3 guys that I ended up having a fight with were my best friends in the world. I mean, we were like the 4 inseparable buddies. And when we came back to New Orleans, my mom had decided not to teach anymore, and my dad had done well enough that they had the means to put us into Newman. And so here we go, getting plugged in. This was gonna be my first time going to school with girls ever. Um, and it was in seventh grade, which is an unbelievably awkward time, as everybody probably remembers. And and here I am still trying to shed a Scottish accent. I'd been in school uniform for the last 2 years, and so my mom had to go out and shop for us. And at that time, like that was the summer that Star Wars came out.
Mhm.
Disco was exploding, and so it was not a particularly good time for fashion. And my mom just she didn't know any better, and so she drug us out to J.C. Penney's, and I got dressed up in the Fox collection, and where they had pants and shirts that you just matched the numbers on them, and they created an outfit. And so I showed up at Newman my very first day in these gigantic like bell bottom corduroys and this I remember it was this knit shirt that had like varying width stripes that were like orange and brown and white and like really bad versions of those colors, and and probably like some kind of Huggy Bear hat. And I went strolling into school and in my moccasins and bell bottoms, and and I'm walking into a little Brooks Brothers ad, with all these kids that could not have been more preppy and you know peg leg, Madras pants, and polo shirts, and I mean, I could not have been more out of place. And so that's how I started my first day at Newman, and it was brutal. Um, and I recovered, but I love that my parents were dead set. They're like, we will help you fit in a little bit better, but we're not going to go to deck you out in 25 Lacoste shirts and all this stuff. Like you're just gonna wear clothes and suck it up. And so I did, and I was, I wasn't, my parents were not from New Orleans, and so I was not part of the blue blood, um, and the blue bloods, and so we didn't belong to clubs and country clubs and that sort of stuff. And my dad was very busy, and so he did not participate in a lot of the social stuff of the Mardi Gras organizations and men's clubs. And so it was an interesting time because I liked everybody, and this was a school that they'd already developed their cliques. There were the kids that were the athletes and the nerds and the kids in the drama club, and then the kids that just didn't fit in anywhere. And I liked everybody, but you weren't supposed to like go and move between. You were supposed to find your group. And so um, I just never really found that, all the way through high school. And so most of my friends were from outside high school. I just kind of went whichever way the wind blew. And I just remember sort of as I was graduating and my granddad being in town, and I got a rejection letter from Clemson, and it was heartbreaking. I wanted to go to Clemson, and and I remember him cuffing me on the back of the neck. He said, "Son, just enjoy this time." He said, "You need to enjoy every bit of this that you can, because this is as good as it gets. These are the salad days." And I just remember him walking away and just going, "God, if high school's as good as it gets, I mean, this sucks." And unfortunately, that was not as good as it got. And I went on, and it baked in a lot of good for me. Because it was very clear that I was not gonna, I wasn't just gonna compromise what I believed in, to fit in with a certain group of people.
Mhm.
And that's always served me well, is to be true to myself. But yeah, I unfortunately I didn't pay attention the way that I should have in high school. I did not take advantage of the of my opportunity at Newman. In spite of that, I mean, it still prepared me unbelievably for college. I do in retrospect. That's the one thing. If I could change anything about my life, I wouldn't change a thing except that that I had been had been more attentive to learning when I had the opportunity to stay in school.
Today's conversation is brought to you in part by Farm Families of Mississippi, reminding us that every meal starts on a farm.
Mississippi farmers raise over 800,000 head of cattle each year. We take care of our livestock so you get what's good for your family on your table. We are only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day. Mississippi needs farmers. The Farm Families of Mississippi.
When it comes to choosing energy for your family and your home, make the smart choice with natural gas from Atmos Energy. It's efficient and reliable energy that's essential for today and generations to come. You can count on affordable natural gas to help you save money and keep you comfortable while fueling your dream home. So make the smart choice and talk to a builder today about including natural gas. Together, we're fueling our energy future. Atmos Energy, your natural gas company.
Is cooking your passion? Do you love to bake? Do you want to be a chef? You need to check out Culinary Arts at Holmes CC. When the affordable tuition you need meets the technical skills you want, that's when you know you're a Bulldog. A Holmes Community College Bulldog. Enroll today at holmescc.edu.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
When it comes to concrete work in central Mississippi, trust a name built on generations of craftsmanship. Nico Concrete Contractor. Nico is a third-generation concrete professional with over 30 years of hands-on experience and more than 20 years in business right here in Brandon. From residential driveways and patios to commercial parking lots, metal building foundations and retaining walls. If you want it done right the first time, call Nico Concrete Contractor. Built on experience, built to last. Audibles continues with support from Farm Families of Mississippi, where agriculture meets everyday life.
You spent some time in college. You went to college in the Carolinas, and you worked at Bill Neal's Crook's Corner restaurant. But you also spent some time on a tugboat in the Gulf of Mexico in the oil fields. So, which one was cooler? Which one had a bigger impact on you? I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere, out in the middle of the Gulf on a tugboat, but then working as a dishwasher and moving your way up at Bill Neal's restaurant. Which one had a bigger impact on you?
Well, I'm a firm believer that you take away from everything you do. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, sometimes it's both. The job on the tugboat came the morning after I graduated from high school, and I was thrown into that. I was the low man on the totem pole. The tugboat captain said, "Congratulations, son. You're the cook." And long and short of it, he gave me a copy of The Joy of Cooking and told me that he'd teach me how to make a pot of coffee and a pot of rice, and as long as I did both of those well, that I would decrease the risk of ending up at the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico, and that everything else was an afterthought. He said, you're cooking for a bunch of Cajuns, and so when the groceries come in, he said, I'll order the groceries. When groceries come in, if we got chicken, on the back of the book, and you find a recipe for chicken, that you like, and and do your best to make that, and you put it on the rice, and off you go. And so I remember the very first thing that I cooked was smothered chicken. And I had some piece chicken that came in, and seasoned it and seared it, and made the gravy and onions, and you know I didn't burn the rice, and everybody was happy. I worked in a galley kitchen, wasn't a hell of a lot bigger than this table, and so everything was within arm's reach, and it was very tidy, and so that when you got out in the Gulf and the boat's rocking, that everything is locked away. So it was very, very secure and tidy. Um, and so I enjoyed that. It was there that I really saw, because I'm extraordinarily impatient, the immediate gratification you get from putting a plate of food in front of someone, them taking a bite, and immediately gauging their response to it. And I love that. The crook's job, I picked up a job actually as a bus boy, and I, uh, I didn't have, let's just say, the requisite people skills to work in the dining room, and so I was relegated to the dish pit. And because I have so much, I have so much nervous energy as a youngster that I couldn't sit still. And so whenever there wasn't anything to do, there was a prep table right behind me that I was working, butt to butt with a prep cook. And so I'd just turn around and pick up a knife, and if he was cutting green onions, I'd go to cutting green onions. And if he was taking corn off the cob, I'd just pick up a cob and start taking. And so Bill saw my interest and saw that I was always asking questions, and that there was I know the day that I really that I caught his eye was because there was one of the two stoves on the line was just filthy, and I had nothing to do, and so I just started. I also I used to take everything apart when I was a kid. I wanted to see how it worked, and so I immediately started dismantling the stove and cleaning all the pieces of it. And and I know that really was just the thing hadn't been taken apart in years. It hadn't been cleaned in forever. And so, I was soaking all the stuff in degreaser and scrubbing it and cleaning it. And so I got promoted into a prep cook, and then quickly he brought me on as sort of his kitchen manager assistant, and took me under his wing. He just saw my interest and how much I loved it and how I responded to things, and loved learning. And so he really took me under his wing. And so that was my first. He was my first mentor. And so to have somebody with that much knowledge, and who was that respected and feared, to take a liking to you and want to share with you what they know, um, I wish that I had recognized years earlier when I was in school that teachers were just doing the same thing. But I always thrived when I was doing something with my hands. And so this is an opportunity to learn, while, working with my hands. And um, so both of those experiences were great, but it was working side by side with Bill that, and growing up in that kitchen that I knew, like, then and there. It's like, well, no matter where I go in the world, I can do this. I can get a job doing this. Now I know how to hold a knife. Now I know how to cut things. Now I know what, the basic terms mean. And so that was exciting.
And then you've got a high school friend that comes to you and says, "Hey, come be my sous chef back in Louisiana." So you get a chance to move back, Louisiana, home state. Was it a difficult decision to move back to Louisiana at that time?
No. Going home was a pretty easy decision, and part of it was because I living in Chapel Hill, Chapel Hill, uh, was a sort of a quintessential college town, and there was lots to keep folks hanging around Chapel Hill. There was a huge arts community. There was a really big music scene going on, and so you had lots of folks that just clung to town. And I watched a number of them, who had clearly been there for 10, 15 years, and they were just sort of floated from job to job to job. And it seemed like the longer they stayed, the harder baked that umbilical cord, got. And So there was this part of me that, that realized, man, it's not, if I don't make a move and do something at some point, you know, I could wake up, at 40 something and find myself still here and doing the same thing. And so when the opportunity came along to go home, it was a very quick and easy decision to make, because I could break the umbilical cord. I could go to New Orleans, and at that time I thought, I could go on and finish my degree, and and then go on to business school or law school, or whatever the hell I could get into at that time, and you know and find the grown up thing that I was supposed to do. Um, but the exact opposite happened. I got home to New Orleans. We got Gotros open, and Gotros, we got our 5-star rating faster than any restaurant had ever gotten it. I want to say it was within like 5 weeks. We had, Gene Borg was the restaurant critic for the Times-Picayune at the time, and he'd been in, made his 5 visits, loved the restaurant, gave us 5 stars, and and we were off to the races. And it was extraordinarily exciting, because that was a different variety of restaurant competition in New Orleans. This was serious. This was professional. Um, you know, Kitchen crews were like gangs, and I mean, and this is at that time, each kitchen crew had their own bar for after work, and you didn't go on somebody else's turf or there was going to be a fight kind of thing. And so, you knew the guys from Commanders hung out at the Rendezvous. Some other, the guys from the upper line went to Les Bon Ton Roulette. We went to Cooter Brown's. Now, we were a small crew. Gotros, there were 3 of us that worked in the kitchen. One of them was our chef who didn't drink, and so that left 2 of us as the gang. So we didn't need to get in any fights. It was incredibly exhilarating, and and we lived that restaurant. I mean, we worked 6 days a week, 3 of us in the kitchen. When we first opened, there was no dishwasher, there was no pastry cook. There were just 3 of us, and we came in every morning, and we did all of the saucier work. We made all the stocks, we did all the desserts, did all the station prep, and then got set up for service, and then worked service. And as soon as service was over, then chef would leave and go sit down in the dining room, to sort of do paperwork and go over the night's events, and the other cook and I cleaned the entire kitchen from stem to stern. And then we'd go sit down with chef after we were done with that and go through each ticket one by one. And we'd turn them over so that we start at the beginning again and go through each one and what had gone right and what had gone wrong on each ticket. And it was like going through, like game films. And, what can we do better? What do we need to change? What's right about this plate? What's wrong about this plate? Do we need to change the garnish? That sort of thing. And, and we would finally wrap up at 2 or 3 in the morning, and probably too many drinks in, and go home, sleep it off, and be back at the restaurant at 9 o'clock the next morning to do it all over again.
Support for Audibles comes from Atmos Energy, helping to fuel homes across the South with safe, reliable, natural gas. We'll be right back.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
From the seed, and the soil grows row after row. We take care of this land, using just the right amount of our natural resources and never more than we need.
We're only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day, because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
When it comes to concrete work in central Mississippi, trust a name built on generations of craftsmanship. Nico Concrete Contractor. Nico is a third-generation concrete professional with over 30 years of hands-on experience and more than 20 years in business right here in Brandon. From residential driveways and patios to commercial parking lots, metal building foundations and retaining walls. If you want it done right the first time, call Nico Concrete Contractor. Built on experience, built to last.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
Welcome back to Audibles, presented in part by Atmos Energy, natural gas, the smart energy choice for your home.
You decide to venture out on your own. Were you nervous? What were you anxious about saying, all right, I'm going to venture out on my own? And you didn't just venture out on your own, you end up here in Oxford.
Now, I think that coming to Oxford, I knew that I didn't have to lean way too far out in front of my skis in order to be successful. I didn't know enough about the restaurant business to have any business going into it on my own, but to come to Oxford in 1992 when there wasn't really anything else going on and that folks were clearly hungry for something that if I did a really good roasted chicken and made some good crab cakes and had a filet and bordelaise with some good roasted garlic mashed potatoes, a piece of salmon, that was cooked well, that people would be happy, and they were, and it didn't hurt not having any competition at all. I mean, not having any competition for 25 years, for the most part, didn't hurt. But, that gave me, I would say a confidence that, sort of between knowing that it was a pretty safe bet, and the fact that it wasn't gonna, I didn't have anything at risk. I mean, we opened City Grocery, I think for, it was at $32,000 or $35,000. I mean, it was just unheard of. It was, that money seemed like a king's ransom back then, but I knew that even then, like, well, I could work that off if 17.5 of that ended up on my plate, and we failed miserably. I'm like, I can pay that back. So, those things, gave me the sort of the confidence that I needed to jump off. And plus, I really wanted to do it. I wanted to have. I'd opened restaurants before, but opening my first one myself, was something I really wanted to get under my belt. So.
It was 92 when City Grocery opened. Everybody's got an opening night story when they open a restaurant. Do you have an opening night story that you can share with us?
I couldn't tell you what day of the week that we opened on, which is sort of surprising. But no, it wasn't until we got to our first graduation that we had one of those nights where all the wheels came off, and that was one where all the plumbing backed up. And I mean, and the restaurants, I mean, the restrooms in that building sit between the dining room and the kitchen, and so all of a sudden the toilets are backing up and water's going in the kitchen and water's going out into the dining room, and and so there I am between cooking pans of shrimp and grits with plungers, trying to get toilets unclogged, and and I had a magnificent plumber at the time that showed up, and we were pulling the toilets up off the floor to run a snake down, and it was insane. And then the exact same thing happened the next graduation Friday. I mean, it literally happened 2 years in a row. to the point where I was convinced that there was something in the way of sabotage going on somewhere. But no, while there were there are lots of stories in that building, it was not an opening night story that I could tell that I remember we had it easy.
Did you ever envision Big Bad Breakfast turning into what it has, where it's multiple states that you're overseeing these restaurants now?
Yes and no.
Okay.
The morning that we opened Big Bad Breakfast, there was just this. It was this tornado of chaos. We're waiting for the health inspector to come and sign off on our final inspection. We're trying to get all the stuff put away and the work site cleaned up. And my wife walked up to me because I was just standing in the middle of the dining room and there's people just racing around me. And she goes, "What are you doing?" You're like staring off into space, mouth breathing, and and I said, "This is the thing that's going to put us on the map." And she said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "You watch. This is the thing that's going to put us on the map." She goes, "But I mean, you've been running this place for 20 years, and you've been written up everywhere, and you've been nominated for beer awards, blah 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 blah." And I said, "But this is the place. You watch me." Um, because nobody else had done it. I knew that people were going to respond to it. Now, I didn't at that time know that we would, that we might open 50 of them or, you know, uh, anything like that. I just knew that it was the thing that people were going to really respond to, or that was the thing that people were really going to respond to. And I didn't know how we were going to catapult it forward. I certainly never dreamed that we would have a year where we opened 10 stores. But uh, it's very real now. And the fun part is that it has taken me away from the kitchen completely. But in the last 5 years, I've basically had to start at first grade again and learning about an industry, or learning a piece of an industry that I thought 5 years ago I would have told you, yeah, I know everything about this that there is to know, and learning multi-unit operation and all of the complications that come along with it, which are myriad. It's 1,000 times more complex than anything that I've ever done before. It's an absolute ball just to have the opportunity to go through that exhilarating learning curve again. It's unbelievable, and to see that we can scale what we're doing from a quality standpoint into multiple stores and not have to sacrifice the vision that we have just because we're scaling. We can maintain a quality of product and a quality of service across multiple stores that that I would have thought 10 years ago. It's like it's not a thing, and it is a thing, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of, and I'm having a lot of fun with. But I mean, it requires diligence like nothing that I have ever dreamed of before.
All the recipes that you have spent countless hours developing, thinking over, looking off into space, mouth breathing, right? Thinking about. I had to use that line. So, what's your favorite item to eat at each of your restaurants? Do you have a favorite?
But here, it's actually we had two things that were on the original menu at Bourrée that have left the menu, and I hope to bring back in a hurry. Our Reuben, which was a staple on the opening menu, and it was one of the reasons that we opened. There wasn't anywhere in town to get a Reuben, and I was craving a Reuben. When I moved to Oxford in '92, there was a way before its time vegetarian co-op grocery store and cafe right next door to City Grocery called The Harvest. And The Harvest made this magnificent mushroom melt, which was just sauteed mushrooms and onions and Worcestershire and soy that they served on toasted wheat bread and Swiss. So it was like a grilled cheese with mushrooms and Swiss cheese and mayonnaise, and it was phenomenal. And that was we got the blessing of the owners. It had been closed for a decade, but when we opened the original Bourrée, and they blessed us, putting that on the menu, and so that was here forever, and that's another one that I've been craving lately. But the we've got a fried shrimp po' boy on the menu that my partner and I both grew up eating at Dom Elise's, and we wanted to go back and recreate the shrimp po' boy from Domalice's that we had growing up. And that's one of my favorite things here. Um, at the grocery, that menu has been changing for 30 years, with the exception of shrimp and grits and the Caesar salad and the house salad. And so, just depending on what is at the chef's whim and whimsy over there is what you'll find. Um, at Snack Bar, Vish's uh, uh, Indian fried chicken sandwich is just one of the sickest things that I've ever eaten in my whole life. And then at Big Bad Breakfast, uh, the there's a thing we call the breakfast crumble, which I love that we sort of glorified. It was a thing that when I'd go through in the mornings to do quality check on the line, when we first opened, I'd grab a styrofoam cup and a biscuit and just crush the biscuit in my hand and drop it into the cup, and put tomato gravy and bacon or sausage, and a couple of poached eggs, and some green onions on it, and just basically eat it with a spoon out of the styrofoam cup. And that became a dish on the menu. Even though I wanted to serve it in the styrofoam cup for the full experience, but I was told that was probably not in our best interest. So that is my go-to, because that was my breakfast meal for forever.
From our view on this farm, food security is national security. Our nation must have a sustainable food source. Keeping the supply chain moving and food on our grocery store shelves by growing the cleanest food in the world.
We're only one of thousands, but we are united as one to grow the food, fiber, and shelter you need every day, because Mississippi needs us. Mississippi needs farmers, the farm families of Mississippi.
Hey, it's me, Gus the Gopher for Atmos Energy. I dig all around the yard. Occasionally, I bump into a utility line and get a headache. But if you hit one with your shovel, backhoe, or ditch digger, you could cause a gas leak, disrupt service, or worse. So call 811 at least 3 business days before you or someone else digs in your yard to have those underground utility-owned lines marked. It's free and it's the law. You dig what I'm saying? For more on safe digging, visit atmosenergy.com/811.
You just lost your mom, and you said that you would love to have one last meal with her. I thought that was an interesting thing and you talked about the impact that she had on you. What would that meal be if you could have one more meal with mom?
Well, we kind of did. She was in town for the Southern Foodways Alliance fall symposium, uh, before she had her fall. Um, and the Sunday of SFA, the chefs who come to cook sort of typically gravitate to my house and gather, and we'll cook red beans and rice, or or vegetables or something, in the afternoon as they're sort of all drifting towards the airport, and watch football. And that particular Sunday, I had the craving for seafood gumbo, and seafood gumbo has been one that, in my mind, it's the most challenging gumbo to make, and I've never really nailed it the way that I wanted to. And so my mom and I got over the pot, and we cooked a pot of seafood gumbo, sort of the middle part of the day. And there were probably 20 people at the house, and when it was done, and we served it up, and it was one of those moments where everybody got in the kitchen and had a bowl and a spoon in their hands, and it got dead silent. And I was like, "That's it! Like that's that's the one I've been waiting for my whole life. I finally, like, that's the recipe I've been looking for, and it was perfect." And and so we sort of hugged over that bowl of gumbo, and I, cleaned out the pot, and I had 3 or 4 quarts of it to put away in the freezer, and I put it away. And of course, then mom went on and had her fall, and then passed away. And so those 3 or 4 quarts were in the freezer, and and every once in a while I'd go and pull one out and and let it thaw and warm it up, and and have folks to come eat. And I was like, there's a little bit of my mom in that in that gumbo every time we thaw one and eat it. And so I also was lucky that as my dad sold our house and or sold their house, and as we were going through mom's stuff in the back of a closet full of office supplies, I found she had stuffed her card file, uh, one of my grandmother's card files, my great grandmother's recipe card file, and a great aunt. So I have all four of those. And so for the past 3 years, I've been cooking from those card files. And so, I have that little piece of all of them. And like to have those cards with each individual's handwriting on it, it's really touching. And it's, every time, I pull one of them out and, go through and it's like, what do I want to cook? It's like having them, here with me again for a second.
What do you want John Currence's legacy to be years from now? How do you want to be remembered, your legacy?
Well, I want my daughter to miss me, when I'm gone, but I don't really, I get asked that every once in a while or something like that, and I don't really think in those terms. I hope that I leave, I leave the world in as good a place as I could find it. That that I've touched people's lives in a way that people that I work with every day, that I've given them the opportunity to have a better quality of life. There's a tremendous amount of satisfaction, and a lot of the people that were here 30 years ago, are still around, and I've seen them, graduate from college, start their families, have their kids grow up and start college and finish college. We've got second generation coming through the restaurants now, working for us. So I feel like I'm seeing a sort of a full circle of life, and if I can, if I've helped, make Oxford, a little bit better a place, than it might have been otherwise, then I'm happy. But I'm not really worried about legacy. I mean, I tell folks all the time that, they want to know how far I want to go with Big Bad Breakfast, and I said, I'm looking at that as, as my retirement plan, so that when the day comes and somebody hands me a check to just get lost, then I'm going to get lost, and what happens from that point forward, like, I don't care. I want to be able to put my feet up and travel with my family, and be able to relax and and enjoy whatever bit of life that I have left, comfortably and with my family.
I know the town of Oxford and the state of Mississippi and the South. And me personally, I appreciate what you've done for the city of Oxford, and I appreciate you taking some time to sit down with us. Thank you for doing this.
Of course, thank you.
Just kind of hit it. We take off and run.
Okay.
So if you're long-winded, that's fine. There's a question you don't want to answer, that's fine. I'm not going to ask you anything controversial or crazy. This is a...
Well, that's unfortunate.
I can.
I'll polarize.
I know you will. There's probably some stuff in here.
Real stories, real legends, the South's own storytelling show. Join us next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.